This is the story of Belle Vue Farm, a special place and of the people who never gave up on protecting it. Rich farmland and meadows, cool, shade-filled forest, a trickling stream, and a mile of Chesapeake Bay coastline. Belle Vue Farm is home to the many landscapes we know and love across Harford County, all in one place. Owned and farmed by the Davis family since before the American Revolution, Belle Vue's history is as unique and significant as the landscape. Belle Vue's rich history and natural beauty have made the property a Harford County jewel for generations. On September 24, 2020, representatives from the Harford County government, the Aberdeen Proving Ground, the Harford Land Trust, and the Davis family gathered at the 347-acre farm to transfer ownership to Harford County and to permanently preserve the beautiful property as a future community park. But preservation doesn't just happen. The success of September 2020 was the result of 3 decades of community effort and was in no way ever guaranteed. What is it about Belle Vue Farm that inspired so many different people to come together to preserve it? Settled on the Oakington Peninsula in Havre de Grace, Belle Vue neighbors Swan Harbor Farm and Old Bay Farm to the north, and Eleanor Miller Tidings Park to the south. Its preservation essentially completes the protection of the Oakington Peninsula. Belle Vue is home to a mile of undeveloped Chesapeake Bay coastline, a rare and precious thing in Harford County today. Views from the coastline bluffs provide a spectacular panorama over the Chesapeake Bay and the distant hills of Cecil County's Elk Neck Peninsula. The gentle ridge of the Oakington Peninsula divides Belle Vue into 2 main watershed areas and ecologically significant zones. Gashies Creek and the associated non-tidal wetlands flow into Swan Creek along the western edge, while the eastern portion of the property drains directly to the Chesapeake Bay. The lower portion of Gashies Creek and the tributary which drains into it from the west is designated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services as critical habitat for the Maryland darter, a federally endangered fish species. While the Maryland darter was native to Harford County and is nowhere else in the world, it has not been seen for over 30 years and is now thought to be extinct. The habitat found at Belle Vue is unusual in the upper Chesapeake Bay and makes the Oakington shore among the most significant habitats in Harford County. Today, the coastal area is home to many different birds, amphibians, and reptiles. The unique landscape allows for a variety of ecosystems to converge and host a mostly intact array of species. A variety of wetland types from seasonal pools and spring seeps provide critical habitats for breeding frogs, toads, and salamanders, most of which serve as indicators of environmental health, as well as floodplain forests that help support woodland species such as the declining eastern box turtle. The tidal sectors of the property have creek and marsh habitats that provide a home for aquatic mammals such as river otters, muskrat, mink, and beaver. More than 260 species of birds have been seen nearby at Swan Harbor Farm, including many rare migrants, making it among the top birding locations in Harford County. With similar habitat found at Belle Vue, it is also likely to be the home of well over 200 bird species. A large number of wintering waterfowl and migrating shorebirds pass through Oakington Peninsula each year. These include iconic species such as the canvasback duck and the tundra swan, from which Swan Harbor got its name. The Chesapeake Bay shore at Belle Vue also includes 2 shallow tidal coves and wetlands. Wetlands are landscapes that are saturated with water consistently or periodically, that are especially important near agricultural lands. Wetlands provide important sensitive habitat for a variety of plants. 2 rare species, the Maryland burr marigold and Parker's pipewort, can be found at Belle Vue. The fields throughout the property are interspersed with forest stands covering approximately 90 acres. The forested areas contain species typical of the coastal plain, including white oak, loblolly pine, sweet gum, and American holly. One of Belle Vue's American holly trees and sycamore trees are listed as Maryland's Big Trees, a program sponsored by the State Department of Natural Resources and Forest Services. The property also contains an impressive boxwood that the Davis family estimates to be more than 300 years old. The forests along the Gashies Creek stream corridor also play an important role on the property, absorbing agricultural nutrients and runoff that would otherwise harm the water quality of the bay. For many generations, Belle Vue Farm has played an important role in Harford County's history. Before European settlement, what is now Harford County belonged to the Susquehanna Indian tribe. Susquehannock villages were built along the mouth of the Susquehanna River in Harford County until a peace treaty was signed with the colony in 1652. The land at Belle Vue was first granted to Garrett Rutson in 1661. Rutson's direct descendant, Mary Garretson, later married Dr. Elijah Davis, who took title to the land in 1794. A member of both the House of Delegates and the Maryland State Senate, Dr. Davis eventually became president of the Maryland Senate during the War of 1812. The historic Belle Vue home remains on the property. The two-story Georgian-style brick house dates to the mid-18th century with period elliptical arch windows facing out over the Chesapeake Bay. Historical records show a kitchen, a carriage house, and two slave quarters. There was also a stable, a meat house, a hen house, and a fish house located on the property. The 1814 tax roll for Belle Vue Farm records that as many as 34 enslaved people once lived on the property. Later on in its history, however, recent research has shown that Belle Vue played an important role in the Underground Railroad system of Harford County.
Havre de Grace, situated at the confluence of the Chesapeake Bay and the Susquehanna River, where Belle Vue is located, was known through oral tradition as the Promised Land, meaning that when enslaved freedom seekers choosing to claim their freedom in the northern states reached Havre de Grace, they knew they were not far from the Mason-Dixon line, the border into the Free State of Pennsylvania. They also knew they had help getting there through the informal network of secret routes, safe houses, and individuals known as the Underground Railroad. These waterways, the bay and the river, played an important role in many documented Underground Railroad stories. One of the most compelling stories of the Underground Railroad is that of the Christiana resistance. This complex series of events that rocked the nation in 1851 culminated in the largest treason trial in U.S. history and was considered one of the sparks leading to the Civil War. It has some deep roots here in Belle Vue Farm. At least 3 individuals involved in the Christiana resistance had been enslaved here.
Belle Vue Farm is also an important part of Harford County's agricultural heritage. The land has been continuously cultivated since its settlement. Its soil ranks among the most productive in the county, with 200 acres of the property currently cultivated for corn and soybeans. The Davis family records indicate that the evolution of agriculture at Belle Vue likely mirrored the wider region, with periods of significant livestock rearing and canning. Belle Vue Farm also represents one of the few remaining active farms within the county's allocated growth area, otherwise called the development envelope. For all these reasons, the Belle Vue Farm was identified as an ideal candidate for preservation decades ago. Starting in 1993, efforts to acquire and preserve Belle Vue Farm began in earnest around the same time that the county acquired Swan Harbor Farm from Johns Hopkins University. David Miller, the executive director of the Harford Land Trust at the time, started conversations with members of the Davis family who were seeking a way to preserve their beloved family farm. At the board meeting on June 15, 1993, the board agreed that the trust would like to help as much as possible achieve that goal. That commitment would span the next 3 decades.
Harford Land Trust has worked to preserve 13,000 acres of land throughout Harford County with dozens of landowners. Each project has the same goal, but no 2 properties or path to preservation is the same. There are often many twists and turns along the preservation process that call for flexibility and ingenuity when protecting a property. Every property and every landowner are unique, but every conservation story starts the same way. It begins with a landowner, an individual or family, who chooses to protect their land forever. One of Harford Land Trust's primary roles is assisting landowners who express interest in protecting their land. When members of the Davis family first reached out to the trust, David Miller and the board were thrilled about the project and explored many different avenues to preserve the property. The trust immediately recognized the value of Belle Vue Farm as one-of-a-kind property with treasured Chesapeake Bay coastline that is extremely limited in Harford County. The trust looked into different funding options and various state and county preservation programs that might be a good fit. The Harford Land Trust has a long history of building partnerships to work together towards preserving land throughout Harford County. Collaborations with the county, state, Aberdeen Proving Ground, and other conservation organizations have allowed the trust to preserve properties that don't always fit into a more well-known land preservation program, but are still very unique and important properties.
The Harford Land Trust devoted significant time and resources to purchase Belle Vue Farm in the early 1990s. A twist came into play, however, when in 1996, Griffith Davis, the oldest of Dr. Davis's 9 children, purchased the property from his siblings toward a generational transfer following the death of Dr. E. Hollister Davis. Griffith Davis lived on the property with his wife Vicki until his death in 2017. Griffith's passing once again set the wheels in motion for the sale of the farm. As attractive as Belle Vue Farm was to the Land Trust as a preservation prospect, there were additional parties that were also interested in the property as well. Drawn to Belle Vue's coastal views and large tract of undeveloped and open land, numerous developers explored options for creating an industrial park, a business complex, and a high-end residential community on the property. Fortunately for Harford County residents and the Land Trust, the Davis family was more interested in preserving their family home and land and began working again with the trust in 2017. With Belle Vue's proximity to the Aberdeen Proving Ground, the property was a candidate for the Army Compatible Use Buffer Program, also known as ACUB. Through this program, the Land Trust and the Aberdeen Proving Ground have worked together for over a decade to preserve land outside of the installation to reduce incompatible development and protect habitat. The Harford Land Trust also reached out to the Harford County government to share their intention to purchase Belle Vue Farm in late 2018. From that point forward, the Land Trust and the Harford County government worked as partners to pursue the acquisition of the property as a future county park. Ultimately, that partnership led to an agreement of sale with Mrs. Davis for the purchase and preservation of Belle Vue Farm in 2020. The acquisition and transaction costs were co-founded by Maryland's Open Space Program, the Harford County government, the Aberdeen Proving Ground, and the Harford Land Trust. Today, Belle Vue Farm is owned by the Harford County government. The Harford County Department of Parks and Recreation is developing a long-term management program for Belle Vue and will continue to lease the crop land as it does with Swan Harbor Farm.
As a public park, Belle Vue Farm will offer many opportunities to the Lower Susquehanna region, from Havre de Grace South to the Oakington Peninsula. The property might allow for the active uses such as hiking and biking, access to the bay for scenic views, and recreational fishing or kayaking. Belle Vue Farm is also well positioned to be included in the Captain John Smith Chesapeake National Historic Trail, a trail spanning from Virginia all the way to New York. Belle Vue's unique ecosystems have the potential to be a living classroom for visitors to learn about tidal and non-tidal wetlands. The property would also be ideal for on-farm demonstrations highlighting the area's agricultural heritage and for detailing the history of the Native Americans who once inhabited this land. The protection of Belle Vue Farm and the Oakington Peninsula is one of the most important land conservation successes in the history of Harford County. The scenic, historic, agricultural, and environmental values of the area are irreplaceable.
The window of opportunity to set aside places for public access to Harford County's stunning landscapes and waterways is limited. This makes the preservation of Belle Vue truly momentous. There is no better example in Harford County of the patience and determination required to conserve land. For the Harford Land Trust, the effort to protect Belle Vue spanned nearly 3 decades, almost the entirety of the organization's existence. The purchase of Belle Vue represents the longest and most expensive effort to date for that local nonprofit. Success was only made possible, however, because of years of local support from Harford Land Trust members, other partners who wholeheartedly embraced and joined the preservation effort, and the family that chose to protect the land they love.